Well, that's not good. Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Botox Games. Today, we have to talk about Mario and Luigi Brothership, because it kind of feels like this game can't catch a win. Now, if you missed my review over on my other channel, at It's Amiibo, you know I love the game. I think Brothership is a fantastic Mario RPG. I think it's a fantastic Mario and Luigi game, and I think it's probably the best Mario RPG on Switch, tied up there with Super Mario RPG Remake. I love both of those games very, very much. However, between the 5 out of 10 review from IGN and how that kind of became a meme, and now everybody's thinking like, oh, this game's a 5 out of 10, even though most of the reviews were in like the 8 or 9 area, right? And between these recent sales numbers coming in from the UK as well as Japan, especially, it's not looking too hot for Mario and Luigi. And I want to talk about that, and I want to talk about why Nintendo released it when they did, and how they could have probably avoided this game not doing too well. I mean, we're talking, this might be, not counting the 3DS remakes that of course bombed, this might only outsell Paper Jam, which, considering the Switch's install base, is ludicrous. Brothership is a fantastic game, and in any other reality, any other year, I feel like would have had no issue clearing 3 million copies sold. It's looking like it might scrape 1.5 million as it stands right now, unless it gets some longer legs and picks up a little bit more as we get closer to Christmas. This game had a rough launch. Let's talk about it. Alrighty, folks, I hope your Thursday morning is going better than Mario and Luigi Brothership is. So we have some sales numbers for this game from the UK as well as from Japan. So the UK numbers came out a couple days ago on November 11th. Christopher Dring here said, Mario & Luigi Brothership managed number 3 in the UK box charts this week. Launch sales were 23% lower than last year's Super Mario RPG Remake and 29% down versus Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door Remake. May as well just stick with those remakes, right, Nintendo? Now, I actually made a video, I think, last week talking about Paper Mario Thousand Year Door, and how I think that game actually is also underperforming based on what you would expect and hope from for a remake of this beloved game. People love it so much. The fact that Thousand Year Door didn't even hit 2 million in a month and a half, like, for a remake, that's very good. For a Nintendo game, that's on the lower end, especially when you consider how well Super Mario RPG did last November. I mean, that game sold like crazy, as we'll get to, especially in Japan. So it's doing worse in the UK box charts, and worth noting, all the numbers we have right now are retail only. So, hopefully, you can hope that maybe the digital SKU was larger for Brothership versus those other games, but I just don't think it's very likely. But it is just shocking to see this level of a drop over these 2 remakes, even though people love those 2 remakes. A new game should, in theory, really never have trouble outselling a remake, and especially when it's Mario and Luigi. Mario and Luigi, traditionally, especially on the DS, right, Bowser's Inside Story, and then on 3DS with Dream Team, like, those games did pretty well. So to see Brothership coming in where it is right now, as it stands, I'm shocked. Frankly, I'm shocked. Even though we have 3 Mario RPGs releasing in a 12-month period, I still thought, like, okay, they did it this way because they had a remake that's going to do well. They have another remake of a beloved classic that's going to do well. And then they end it with a new game because the new game is a new game. The people that, play the remakes, those are more hardcore fans. Brothership should appeal to a more widespread audience because it is a new game, and it is their big holiday game this year. And it's, that didn't seem to pan out for them. And I think there's a couple other things that they maybe not overlooked, but, like, there's a couple missteps I feel like they took with this release. But we have the numbers for Japan here. Reading from Pierre, we have the Famitsu sales for November 4th through November 10th. So this is what, like 3 days on sale, but that's usually how it tracks. And we'll compare these numbers to other Mario RPGs in Japan. But Brothership is number 1 this week in Japan with 63,000 units sold. Now, having nothing to base that off of, you're thinking, oh, that's pretty good. 63,000 is a lot. That is physical copies only. That's not counting digital. With digital, you hope it's at least at 110,000, maybe 100,000 on the low end, but probably around that 100,000 mark for Brothership in Japan alone, which, that sounds fine, right? Like, you think, okay, I mean, that's good. The game's going to sell 1 million copies, whatever, right? That's fine. Brothership, 43,000 on week 3, right? That's crazy. So that game's already having pretty good legs. Here's the thing with Brothership, though. That is a massive, massive drop over the other Mario RPGs. Like, I think it might be worse than what happened in the UK. It's when you start comparing it to other Mario RPGs on Switch that the number becomes a lot more damning, I would say, especially when you consider that Mario RPGs are going to sell best in Japan because Japan loves RPGs. So, Thousand Year Door Remake sold 115,000 units in its first couple of days, almost double what Brothership just did during a holiday period. And Thousand Year Door, as we discussed last week, didn't do that well. It's probably going to pass 2 million. I don't think it goes past 2.5 million. If it's lucky, maybe it will, but it's definitely not going to pass 3 million considering the legs these Switch games are having. So if Thousand Year Door did 115,000 in its first couple days, and Brothership did 63,000 in its first couple of days, you got to kind of do the math there. Well, I don't think it'll be directly like, oh, this game's going to do half. I think Brothership will probably have better legs than Thousand Year Door because it is a new game and because we will have these couple of weeks ramping up to Christmas. But that's rough, man, for this remake of a game that released in May that already, in my opinion, didn't do that well, for it to do that much better than your new flagship holiday title with Brothership. That is a bad look, man, and it's a bad sign for Brothership, and it's a bad sign for Mario and Luigi moving forward. I don't know if Nintendo will look at that and think, oh, we don't need to do Mario and Luigi anymore. I hope not. They probably won't. I think Nintendo is smarter than that, but that's rough, man. But it gets even crazier when you compare it to the launch of Super Mario RPG Remake in Japan. That sold 300,000 units in its first week last November. So we have seen this trajectory where Mario RPG Remake came out last November, did really well, right? Did incredibly well. That was their big holiday game last year, their big November release, the week before Black Friday, as they always have. Then you have Thousand Year Door with a huge drop-off of over, 200,000 units, or about 200,000 units. And then now you have Brothership selling a fraction of that. These are bad numbers. Hopefully, the sales in the US and other territories really carry Brothership and make it sell better than Thousand Year Door, right? You would hope. I know people love Thousand Year Door, but you would hope that Brothership sells better than that. It's a new game. Hopefully, the other regions can carry the sales of this game. Hopefully, it has better legs than Thousand Year Door and Mario RPG Remake have had, because those games sold, out the gate decently, right? Like, looking at this chart, Thousand Year Door actually sold out the gate better than Origami King. However, the tail on that game has been much shorter than Origami King. Granted, we don't have as much data. It's only been a few months of sales data for that, but it's looking like these Switch games are dying much faster. They're having that initial, pop when they release, and then they kind of just stop selling, because the people who are interested in the Paper Mario game, who buy a Switch in 2024, they're probably going to buy Origami King, right? That's kind of the issue we've seen with a lot of Switch games that are getting multiple iterations on the console. So they kind of just go back and play the original. Same thing with Luigi's Mansion 2 HD. I think that this game is going to suffer a similar fate, where if you buy a Switch in 2024, you're just going to get Luigi's Mansion 3 because it is a cheaper game. It's often on sale at retail. It's still stocked at retail. And it looks like that might just keep happening here with these Mario RPGs, where they just keep selling less and less and less. And I just hope Nintendo doesn't take the wrong lesson from it. We have the mixed review scores, which I was not expecting. And then you have the sales numbers, which are, they're pretty bad comparing it to the other, other Mario and Luigi entries here. You have Bowser's Inside Story, which did really well in Japan, 220,000 units on the DS back in 2009. That was like the peak of the DS. Then you have Partners in Time, 133,000 units. You have Dream Team with 108,000, and then you get down to Superstar Saga, which was a new IP at that point, or a new kind of sub-series for Mario. That sold 63,000, so very similar numbers to Brothership there. Then you have Paper Jam, which sold 50,000 in its first week. And Paper Jam, I think, is the best point of comparison here, because Paper Jam, I believe, just barely passed 1 million copies sold. So I don't know, man. You would hope that with digital, Brothership is quite a bit ahead of that, almost double, because you could buy 3DS games digitally, but I just feel like that split was it was not that big of a split, right? Like, I feel like most people were still buying physical games back in 2015 when that released, and in 2016. So I feel like for Paper Jam, that game probably maybe sold, I don't know, like 70,000 first week in Japan total if you include digital, whereas with Brothership, you're hoping it's like 110, hopefully even like 120 when you include the eShop sales for that game. It's rough, man. And it's got me really questioning the release strategy over the past 12 months. We've, in the moment, it's easy to get hyped up. It's like, oh, Nintendo's doing this Mario RPG Renaissance. We're getting all these great remakes, and we're getting this new game to cap it all off at the end of the 12-month period there. And as a fan, it's great. It's a buffet. On the other hand, it's also kind of too much, and I think that might be part of it, right? I think maybe people are just fatigued. Even the people that are hardcore Mario RPG fans, they just played 2 back-to-back earlier this year, or, including November, so late last year, and then earlier this year with Thousand Year Door. Do they really want another one so soon as their big holiday, title for Switch? I think a lot of people are buying Mario Party, and it makes me wonder, like, did something happen? Was this always the plan? Was it always their plan to just bum rush all of these Mario RPGs, or did something get shifted? Now, we heard from the Pokemon data leak that apparently Legends EA was originally intended to be a 2024 game, and that kind of had me thinking, maybe Mario and Luigi Brothership was intended to be a 2025 release. Maybe that game was not supposed to release so close to Thousand Year Door and Super Mario RPG. Maybe that was not part of their plan, but then things changed. Maybe Thousand Year Door was intended to be a later 2024 release, but then earlier this year, maybe late last, they decided, hey, we need to delay Legends EA to polish it up more. Maybe Thousand Year Door was going to be like a September game initially, and then Brothership was going to be like their big March game. Instead of Xenoblade, maybe Brothership was going to be the March game next year. And then that would have just had a much nicer spacing. It still would have been a lot, 18-month period. You're still getting 3 Mario RPGs. That's still, I would argue, too much. But it would have helped it breathe a little bit more. Another thing I realized, talking about specifically the Japanese sales of this game being poor, and I think this adds credence to my theory that maybe things were shifted around and it wasn't supposed to be their November release. Dragon Quest III comes out next week. Now, for Western listeners, if you're in America, you're in Europe, Dragon Quest, not that big of a deal in these countries, right? Where we live, us English speakers. Dragon Quest is absolutely massive in Japan. I believe Dragon Quest 11S, a 2-year-old port on Switch at the time, sold 300,000 units in its first week in Japan. And, keep in mind, like, that game was already out on PS4 and on 3DS at that point, and it still did that well on the Switch. Dragon Quest III Remake is going to be absolutely massive next week, or actually it's out now, but when we hear the numbers, that game is going to be absolutely massive. I wouldn't be surprised if it sold, 300, 400,000 between Switch and PS5 and Xbox, I suppose, if anybody in Japan's buying Dragon Quest on Xbox. You should not have released a turn-based Mario RPG a week before Dragon Quest. I think if you had released Brothership, I'm not even joking, any other week in the year, it probably would have done better. Or I guess any other week, not counting this week with Dragon Quest. So any other, outside of this 2-week period that we're in, the first half of November, if it had released in early December, if it had released in September, if it had released in October, it probably would have done better. But because it released 7 days before Dragon Quest III, in the most important territory for a turn-based Mario RPG, what do you think the Japanese audience is going to do, Nintendo? They're not going to have time to play Brothership, and Dragon Quest is more important to them than Mario and Luigi. It just is. So they're not going to buy Brothership, they're just going to save their money and wait for Dragon Quest. Now, Dragon Quest 3 will certainly sell the most on Switch, so Nintendo's still getting that 30% cut or whatever, so I'm sure they're happy either way. I just feel like the release strategy for this game, beyond just there being, the 3 and 12 month, thing there, it releasing this week specifically so close to Dragon Quest 3 just feels like such a boneheaded decision that I really cannot wrap my head around. So it's sad to see. Like I said, I hope Nintendo doesn't take the wrong lesson from this. I hope they understand why this game didn't sell that well, or is seemingly not selling that well. Like I said, when we get the full numbers and at the end of January, hopefully it's revealed that, in the US and everything, Brothership actually did really well. But based on what we're seeing in the UK, based on what we're seeing from these Japanese numbers, it's not looking too good. I really hope it has longer legs, though. I hope this game is able to at least clear 2 million. I mean, this game is deserving of that at the very least. I feel like any other time of year, like I said, though, it would have sold like 3 million copies, and I think that's good. That's a good number. But as it stands, I mean, it's not looking too hot for Mario and Luigi Brotherships. But yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. What do you think of these Mario and Luigi Brothership sales? Are you optimistic that they will pick up, or do you think this is a not good sign for this beloved Mario sub-series? Like I said, I like to think that Nintendo won't take the wrong lesson from this, and they'll still get another Mario and Luigi in this style from Acquire, 4 or 5 years down the line on Switch 2. And, when the Switch 2 is newer, that game should probably do better, and, it can be kind of positioned a little bit better in their release lineup. So let me know what you think. Of course, subscribe here for more Nintendo content, coverage, discussion, news, theories, speculation, all that fun stuff. Follow me on Twitter at BoTalksGames, and check out my other channel at It's Amiibo. Until next time, folks, peace.